Guys, it's Watch News Weekly, and it's just me, all by myself. Marco's somewhere in Arizona visiting clients. Adrian is busy with the sales team. But I could not do this because today's episode is all about my favorite brand, and that is Audemars Piguet. Some crazy releases from my favorite brand. Obviously starting with the biggest bang of them all, and that is now I guess what I would call a true John Mayer, right? Because it actually says John Mayer on the manufacturer's website. Not the Daytona that was dubbed John Mayer, but an AP in collaboration with John Mayer. I think the exact wording on the website was John Mayer has long been a friend of a brand. Like it's funny, they didn't call him an ambassador or they didn't call him anything else. They just said he's been a friend of the brand. So I don't know what that means. Did John Mayer get paid for this? I don't know, but I guess I could try to DM him and ask him. But in either case, this watch, the Perpetual calendar, John Mayer, it's all about the dial, right? And at first glance, you look at this dial and you can see the picture on the screen, and it looks like crystals, right? It looks like little crystals popping out of the dial. You would think this is a natural crystal dial. Well, in reality, it actually isn't. What this is actually a brass dial. And what they did is they cut out, it's just like a stamp process where they stamped out a bunch of these irregular shapes, if you will, right? Irregular crystal-like shapes. They put them all together. And the result gives you the appearance of like a natural, as if these crystals are growing, literally growing out of the dial, right? But it's just plain old brass. Now, looking at the watch, again, you see the same traditional layout, right, of a Quantum Perpetual from Audemars Piguet. The subdials are still PVD'd. And again, people hear PVD, they usually think black, right? That's usually what coincides with PVD. This is actually blue, but it's still the same process. So the subdials are done the same exact way, the tachometer scale, et cetera, et cetera. Overall, nothing aesthetically different outside of obviously the dial, but I believe the whole point of this watch was the dial, and that's why it was dubbed the Crystal Sky, because you look at this thing and it's just like, wow. Now, in other news for Audemars Piguet, they discontinued the 16204 in stainless steel. They also discontinued the Code 1159 three-hand models, and now they're only going to have the chronographs in pink gold and stainless steel. I talked about this numerous times before. I feel like Audemars Piguet has been a pioneer in aesthetics or use of material, right? Going back to rubber clads, going back to PVD watches, titanium, obviously the ceramics, and they're continuing to push the envelope and experimenting, except this time they're, I guess you could say, still experimentation with material. They made a new gold. They called it sand gold, right? Or the way they achieved this tannish color, and by the way, in the big way, they took the open work Royal Oak Tourbillon, flying Tourbillon. I mean, that watch in its own bonkers. We had one here. We had the first version of it here earlier. We sold it. It's like one of those watches I really wanted to keep. And I'll tell you shortly how they made the sand gold, but prior to that, I just wanted to sort of recap of what's going on in the world of AP. We got to talk about 3 new Royal Oak Tourbillon, from the new RD number 3, Research and Development number 3, to some new 41 millimeter Royal Oaks. And I'm going to jump to the sand color one. Let me just throw that one up on the screen. Again, what they did is, all they did was, like the way different color golds are made, right? You mix, no gold is pure. None of these watches are 24 karat. So you have an addition of silvers, you have an addition of brass into golds, and so on and so forth. Well, in this case, what they did is they removed silver from the mix and they replaced it with palladium. By experimenting with this as such, that's how they achieved this new little sand color that they called it, or they called it sand gold. I'm going to throw this one up on the screen. By removing silver and adding palladium, you sort of get a beige color out of this gold. It's still rose gold, but it's not rose gold. It's going to be very hard for me to be the judge on this watch until I actually physically see it in person. Pictures, I mean, it looks amazing on picture. The watch itself was amazing. I love that particular watch. But they took a rose gold and they subdued it to a point where it's just like beige, for the lack of terminology. You guys comment below, let me know what you think. But I'm going to be the judge on this watch when it actually comes in and I'm able to see it in person. The new RG3, Royal Oak Tourbillon, baguette markers on the dial, baguette bezel, 37 millimeters. Me and Adrian had this discussion earlier when we were talking about it on Instagram, where what is the new CEO doing? What is the direction that she's taking the company? Because if you look at the new lineup, they came out with a couple of men's watches and a ton of seemingly ladies' watches. 37 millimeters synonymously has always been a ladies' size watch for Audemars Piguet. Came out with a Royal Oak in a 33 millimeter, later moved it up to the 37 millimeter, also making it offshore ladies in the 37 millimeters. And now you have all these new 37 millimeter models coming out. Apparently, the direction she wanted to take is she wanted to connect more with the female client. Begs the question, what is this new lady doing? Mind you, she's got very, very big shoes to fill. right? Francois left at the very peak of the brand, the highest the brand has ever been, the most popular the brand has ever been. Now she's got to step in and try to take over the reins and also try to put her own stamp on it. Now, is it because she's a female, she's making female watches? No, this is my take on it. Now, Adrian said, listen, it's no secret that the popularity of fancy watches between men and women are like this, much like it is in jewelry, where, jewelry is a women's world and watches are usually a men's world, but obviously there's a fair share of female clients out there. And perhaps this was her way by saying, I'm going to throw out a couple of candies on the man's side, and then I'm going to fill the rest of this stuff in either with what will appeal to ladies or perhaps men, where the trends are now to go back to going smaller. Maybe men will go back to wearing 37 millimeter watches. Back in the day, a large watch was 33 to 36 millimeters, right? So we don't know what the strategy is there. But what we do know is this R&D number 3 is a complete knockout aesthetically. Would be curious to see how that sits on a wrist, on a bracelet. Again, it's one of those watches where you have to try it on in person. I don't need to see it in person in order to say this thing is a knockout. I mean, hefty price, what is it, 240,000? It's going to be one of those watches. It's going to be one of those watches that you're going to have to kind of try on the wrist and see, hey, that's definitely for my wrist size. I have a small wrist, or smaller than average, I should say. But until I try it on, I have to be the judge of that, how it sits on the wrist. Aesthetically, from the pictures, knockout. And of course, they added a 41 millimeter version as well in a chronograph, yellow gold. Again, sort of that Vonnier dial, as I like to call it, right? Or gradient color dial, where it goes from dark to yellow. I absolutely love this look aesthetically. And of course, they did some offshore releases as well. And I'm very, very, very happy about the offshore releases. And the reason I'm so excited about it is they brought back what they already made. They brought back the rubber clad, right? You have a rubber blue bezel, something that hasn't been done before because the rubber clads were always a black bezel. Unless you're talking about ladies' pieces, they did some rubber pieces. They did some rubber clads for ladies in different colors. They did it in white, they did it in plum, they did it in lime green, they did it in purple, they did it in black. But this new rubber clad is right up my alley. I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't do this in a chronograph right away. They sort of went with just an automatic. But I think they did that to sort of keep the prices down. This thing comes in at $27,800 list, okay? And again, they even said it themselves, this is reminiscent of the old 25940 rubber clads. I'm glad they brought this back because I think the rubber clad was one of the most iconic things they've ever made. Again, at the time, that was the use of materials. That was something different. That was something avant-garde. And that's what AP has always been about. Now they went back to the 39 millimeter size, something a lot of the collectors have been asking for. Most collectors out there that have been with Audemars Piguet for a while and been a Royal Oak fan and an offshore fan, they always tend to go back to that 39 millimeter size, which was the perfect size for a Royal Oak, be it a chronograph, be it an automatic, or be it a skeleton. They discontinued the 16202, they went to the 16204, which is pretty much the same watch, except now it's in a 39 millimeter. If you look at the watch, aesthetically, not much changes from the newer skeleton models. However, again, one of those watches you have to throw on the wrist to figure out if this is a better version than its predecessor. However, I will tell you this, Adrian, for example, seems to think that the 41 millimeter is the perfect size for skeleton APs, right? That the double balance is the quintessential watch for him, specifically in the black ceramic. But I don't have to throw this on the wrist to say that that would be a watch for me for one simple reason, because the 39 millimeter has always been the perfect fit for me, even though technically it's a little too big for my wrist, but from a comfort level, from the thickness of the case to everything else, 39 millimeters is where it's been for me always, which is why I always tend to go back to like a 15300 Royal Oak in stainless steel. Two more 41 millimeter tourbillons, and I don't know how many more 41 millimeter tourbillon one needs. Okay, so if you're looking at the one on the right, it's rose gold with a dial that we've seen in the titanium version, I believe. We've seen the dial on the left before in other variations in Royal Oak, so it's sort of like going Rolex, subtle incremental changes on pieces that have done before, have done well. There's no information anywhere whether or not they're discontinuing any of the existing 41 millimeter Royal Oaks. A ton of them are still on the website, so I don't know if this was necessary, if you will, right? I'm a big fan of the original Royal Oak 41 millimeter tourbillon that they came out with back in the day with the blue tapisserie dial. That was just enough, I feel like. They did it in rose gold, they did it in stainless steel, and I felt like this was enough. I really, really wish that they gave me that in yellow gold. Give that to me in yellow gold green dial if you're gonna do something existing as far as dial is concerned. Don't give me the same dial you've put in the watch before and put it in the rose gold. I do like the Vonnier reddish, purplish, black dial. I certainly like that one. this camouflage that they show. So they figured out this, now this camouflage offshore that they show, which by the way, let me throw that thing up on the screen, which by the way, I'm a humongous fan. This was the last revamp they did of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak offshore, Tourbillon specifically, and I was a humongous fan of the layout of the dial. The way it's semi-skeletonized, the way how it's sort of broken into parts, kind of looks like a map, if you will, or a puzzle, right? I was a big fan of that to begin with when they first came out with that watch, right? To take it back to innovation in the use of materials, of course, every company has fancy ways of calling things, and they called this one the SPS, which is spark plasma centering, whatever the hell that means, right? They could have just said camouflage ceramics, right? But this is the process that they called where they're able to achieve pretty much any type of pattern within ceramics. Ceramics are not easy to work with, which is why you don't see a whole lot of companies out there making full-blown ceramic perpetuals, or even have ceramic bezels, if you will, right? To the extent that Audemars Piguet has it, right? You have ceramic inserts on Rolexes, but that's not the same. This is something completely different. And again, to go back to the picture, the result is absolutely amazing. Funny how they test things out on like very, very expensive watches. Will there be a day we're going to see this come down to the level of a Royal Oak that's not a skeleton or a Perpetual, but something like plain? This is the one thing that Audemars Piguet hasn't done really well, and I think there's a reason behind it, because there's a lot of money that goes into research and development. People look at the end product and say, oh, it costs them this to make, and they mark it up 8x. No, it doesn't cost them that to make, because some of the most expensive things out there in the world of watches, and a lot of people that understand manufacturing and creating a watch brand, I've touched upon it with quite a few people. I've consulted on certain projects myself. It's really, really expensive up front. And that most expense goes into research and development. It goes into tooling. It goes into putting together the machinery that's actually going to then mass produce all this stuff. It's a very, very, very big cost up front, which is why when people ask me, Ron, why don't you build your own brand? I'm like, oh, I don't have that kind of money. Unless you're coming in there with 20 million bucks up front before you make a single watch to spend on research and development, machinery, tools, etc., especially when you're innovating and making something that has never been done before, you're not creating a watch brand. Overall, I got to tell you this. I'm taking it to assumption that this is the direction of the new CEO. I see her picking up where Francois left off. Well, I should say where the company's direction has been for many, many years. Going back to the times where Francois was just the CEO of Americas, not the global CEO. And that is innovation, pushing the boundaries of design, pushing the boundaries of material use, not being afraid to stick to the greatest blank canvas in the world, and that is the Royal Oak, discontinuing a few things, perhaps paying attention to the female clients of the world, trying to grow that business, and taking a bit of a pause, because I think if they came out with 50 new Royal Oaks today, considering where the market landscape is today, I don't know how well that would sit with current collectors, because people are still getting over the shell shock that their watches went from trading at 3x to 1.5 to 2x. I know. Market crash, that's what everybody's saying. Do let me know your thoughts, and as always, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, like, comment, share, subscribe to all those wonderful things that help this channel grow. And that's it for this episode of Watch News Weekly. Sorry, it's a little bit different than normal, but I hope you enjoyed it. See you on the next one.